You wake up one day lying beside a muddy road, just outside the walls of a medieval European town. Everything is unfamiliar, and the local language is completely foreign. So, how long could you actually last? First, let's clear up a common misconception. The Middle Ages wasn't a single, frozen setting that lasted 1,000 years. Life in 9th century Scandinavia was worlds apart from 14th century Florence. To make this survival scenario easier to picture, let's place you in a small market town in England around the year 1300. A relatively peaceful time before the plague, the wars, and the famines. Even so, your first day is going to be a genuine shock. The immediate problem is the language barrier. Even if you speak modern English, the locals will look at you like you just fell out of the sky. Starving? Try begging for food? After a lot of frantic hand-waving, the baker might figure out you're hungry. But understanding you is one thing. Feeding you for free is another. A single loaf of bread represents an entire chain of costly labor. Planting, harvesting, milling, hauling, and firing the oven. While religious institutions and wealthier townsfolk sometimes gave to the poor, their resources were extremely limited. If you look able-bodied, the rule is simple. No work, no food. Your most valuable survival skill right now is successfully miming your way into a manual labor job. Hauling goods, chopping wood, mucking out stables, unloading cargo. These things require zero conversational fluency. By midday, in exchange for blistered hands and an aching back, you'll earn a plain meal of coarse bread, legumes, vegetables, and weak ale. It sounds rough, but it's actually fairly nutritious. Don't let movies fool you into thinking medieval people survived on rotten meat and ditch water. Their diet was actually pretty varied. Bread, vegetables, fruit, cheese, eggs, and yes, meat on occasion. With your belly full, you need to think about shelter. This society runs on relationships. Family and community are the safety net for any individual. You, on the other hand, a homeless stranger with no background, will automatically be seen as a thief, a beggar, or a runaway serf. You have no money to rent a room. If you're lucky, you can beg to sleep in a barn or a church. But if you're still outside when the sun goes down and the town gates close, you're looking at freezing to death or getting robbed. Time wasn't tracked by personal clocks back then. It revolved around sunlight and church bells, which signaled everything from prayer hours to market time to emergencies. After dark, the streets went pitch black because candles were expensive, and an uncontrolled fire could burn down an entire neighborhood of wooden buildings. Because of those risks, many towns enforced strict curfews. Reading the situation, you make your smartest decision of the day. Find a family willing to let you sleep inside in exchange for your labor. Congratulations, you've survived day one. But lasting a full year is a completely different story. A lot of people who read isekai novels or power fantasy stories think that bringing 21st century knowledge back to the past means you can build electricity, manufacture antibiotics, or invent a steam engine and take over the world. Hate to break it to you, no chance. You'd almost certainly accomplish none of it. You might understand the principle behind a battery, but where do you get pure chemicals, uniform copper wire, or precision glassware? You know that bacteria cause disease, but how do you isolate penicillin, control dosages, and avoid poisoning patients without a laboratory? All of modern knowledge is rooted in an incredibly complex supply chain of materials and tools. Without that chain, your brilliant ideas stay permanently on paper. What actually has immediate, real-world value are practical hands-on skills. Sewing, sharpening tools, bookkeeping, baking, carpentry, and even if you're literate, you'd have to relearn the local writing system and administrative language from scratch. The safest path to fitting in is to apprentice yourself to a craftsman. You get food, clothing, and a chance to learn a trade. In return, you work hard for years under strict rules. The guilds of that era protected their members fiercely, but they were equally hostile to outsiders. You can't just hang up a sign declaring yourself the best physician or master craftsman in the region. Living in this era, the risk of death doesn't only come from terrifying pandemics. A small cut on your hand, a rotten tooth, a simple bout of diarrhea can all kill you without antibiotics. Grueling physical labor, toxic smoke from cooking fires, and rampant parasites wear your body down fast. Medieval medicine was a mixed picture. Some herbal treatments and hands-on remedies actually worked to a degree, but alongside those were plenty of pseudo-scientific practices rooted in astrology and humoral theory, some of which could kill you faster than the illness. Who treated you, whether a university-trained physician, a barber surgeon, or a folk healer, depended entirely on how much money you had. On top of that, if you rely on modern medicine, say you're severely nearsighted and need glasses, or you have a chronic condition that requires insulin, your odds of survival drop to nearly zero. This is the biggest blind spot in isekai fiction, which almost always assumes the protagonist starts with a perfectly healthy body. On the topic of hygiene, medieval people were not filthy for 1,000 straight years, the way many assume. They bathed, did laundry, and combed their hair regularly. The real weak point was waste disposal. With no concept of germ theory, people simply didn't understand how dangerous contaminated water could be. You might be a perfectly clean person and still get sick from a single sip of water. If you're lucky enough to survive the weather and illness, you'll eventually have to deal with the legal system. It wasn't all torture and dungeons. There were juries, fines, and formal processes. But your biggest problem is that you have no reputation. Back then, personal character could outweigh hard evidence in court. If something goes wrong, who's going to stand up and vouch for you? If nobody will, you're in serious trouble. The best armor in the Middle Ages wasn't a sword or an iron shield. It was being accepted by a community. Gradually, once you've settled in as a craftsman's assistant, life starts to take on brighter colors. Medieval people had rich social lives, feasts, dancing, music, bustling markets, and lively religious festivals. In a world without social media or television, these fairs were the single most important source of news and entertainment all year. You might actually feel less lonely there than you do now. Family, coworkers, and neighbors were always around, ready to help in hard times. The trade-off is that you give up privacy. The community protects you, but it also watches everything you do. This survival picture gets more complicated depending on your gender and age. Medieval women contributed enormously to every part of economic life, from farming and trade to medicine, and their level of independence varied greatly by class and marital status. But they faced one enormous risk that men did not: the dangers of pregnancy and childbirth. Similarly, children were loved, but they were also put to work early. The single greatest barrier to a long life was surviving childhood. Those who made it past that milestone could realistically live into their 60s or beyond. Just when things seem stable, the final boss appears. The year 1348. The Black Death, Plague. It didn't spread because people were dirty or ignorant. It moved through the very trade networks, ships, and dense settlements that kept society alive. You have 21st century knowledge telling you to isolate, quarantine, and control the rat population? Sure, you know that. But how do you actually do it? Can you convince your employer to shut down the shop? Do you have the money to flee? And where would you go when every village sees a stranger and reaches for a stick because they're terrified of infection? If you survive the pandemic, you'll witness a world turned completely upside down. Labor shortages will ignite fierce clashes between workers, demanding higher wages, and authorities trying to hold the old order in place. The disease will have transformed itself into a full-scale restructuring of economy and power. To sum it all up, after a year of surviving the medieval world, you'd realize you make it not because you know the earth is round or can name the year the printing press was invented. You survive by learning the local language, working hard, avoiding infection, and finding people who have your back. The Middle Ages wasn't a horror movie stretched across 1,000 years. It was a living, breathing society where people adapted and laid the groundwork for the modern world we live in today. We're used to standing in the 21st century and passing judgment on the past. But flip that perspective. If a medieval person stepped into our world, they'd be overwhelmed by electricity, modern medicine, and material abundance. But once the shine wore off, they'd see people living isolated in apartments, throwing away perfectly good food, locked in windowless rooms without sunlight, spending most of their lives communicating with strangers through glowing rectangles. They might admire how far we've come, but there's a good chance they'd also feel sorry for how profoundly alone we are. And maybe a few centuries from now, future generations will look back at our era with the same mix of curiosity and bias we project onto the Middle Ages. So, can you survive in the Middle Ages? Absolutely. But your greatest advantage won't be that you're smarter than the people who lived then. Your greatest advantage is realizing quickly that you are not nearly as much smarter than them as you thought. What do you think? If I missed anything, drop it in the comments below. Don't forget to subscribe so you never miss a video. Take care, and I'll see you next time.